The Miami Dolphins are set to host the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday in Week 8, and we are exploring our final thoughts here ahead of this game here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft Lead for the 33rd team. Appreciate all of our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Dolphins, 2-4, getting ready to undergo a challenging stretch of the schedule where you have Buffalo after this week. In Buffalo, you have the Rams on Monday Night Football the week after that. A very undesirable place to be for a football team that has backed itself into a corner. And if there's any hope of this team trending towards winning records and playoff appearance, it has to start now. It's now or never for this football team. And me saying that doesn't dismiss the fact that there are substantial issues that still exist with this football team. And the return of Tua Tagovailoa will not take care of. And I think it is fair to have tempered expectations for the remainder of the season. But we'll get into that a little bit at the end of the show today, looking at fan psyche, kind of the mentality that I've experienced a lot in talking about the football team. We'll give our final predictions. But first, a couple of matchups that I think are going to be defining elements of the game that's played on Sunday. And they're going to play the game on Sunday. So we are also going to spend time on the show, talking about the game on Sunday and what a path looks like to victory and what a path looks like to defeat. Because you got to prep for all the games. They're going to play them regardless of what your temperature is, of how good or bad the team is, and what the point is of the remainder of the season. They're going to play the games, so we have to talk about and prep to play the games so we know what we're looking for, so we know if it goes well or not. Hope that makes sense. The injury report for the Cardinals, Dennis Gardeck out, ACL tear. He's out for the season. Darius Robinson, their first-round draft choice, continuing to miss time, was a non-participant on Thursday. Fellow defensive lineman Roy Lopez with an ankle non-participant. Sean Murphy-Bunting, perhaps their best corner, a non-participant as well. And then Kelvin Beachum, offensive tackle, was added to the list as well as a non-participant with a groin. So that's the injury report update from Arizona side of things. From Miami side of things, Tyreek Hill and Zach Sealer were both added to the injury report on Thursday, with Tyreek had a foot and Zach had an eye. Both were limited. Doesn't seem like there's anything particularly alarming about both of those situations. Jalen Waddle limited with a quad, but you knew he got bumped a little early in the Colts game. Tua upgraded from limited to full participant with the return from the concussion from Wednesday to Thursday. Seems all is on track for him to make his return against the Cardinals, which means from a matchup perspective, you and your offensive line is the Dolphins. Coming into this game for me, regardless of how well the Dolphins passing offense does or does not hum, you look at what Arizona has up front defensively. I'm just looking at their depth chart right now with their snap counts for the season defensively. You should be able to handle a lot of these matchups with what you have up front. And I know the offensive line has been maligned for forever in Miami, and it's a group that I would have invested more in personally this offseason. What the Dolphins did, they chose not to. They've bet on continuity in the group. I think you've seen growth without Tua as far as the run game and the execution of the run game, and there's been continuity with that group, so that's good. I think you can continue to see that grow and expand. And this front with LJ Collier and Kyrus Tonga and Naquan Jones and Dante Stills and Zaven Collins and Jesse Luketa and Julian Aquara and Xavier Thomas and Victor Demukeji, that's the front for Arizona. with linebackers behind it and Mac Wilson and Chris Barnes and Kaiser White, like, I'm sorry, respectfully, if you don't run for 140, 150 against this team, I'm going to have a problem with it. And maybe you don't because you pass for a bunch of yards and then like there's a pathway in which that's acceptable. But my expectations for the Dolphins as a football team and their front against what the Cardinals are able to trot out, knowing that you might be missing Roy Lopez out of that group, knowing that your first round draft pick's not going to play for you, knowing that Dennis Gardeck, your best player, is out for the season. Like it's a storyline from like an expectations perspective. I don't have big picture expectations anymore, but I do have week by week expectations based on what the team on the other side of the ball is affording you from a matchups perspective. And I look at the Cardinals in their front. Y'all should be able to run the ball healthily. Y'all should post season high numbers running the ball. And the only way you don't is it's because you find life in the passing game that you haven't had all season long other than the second half against Jacksonville. And if you do that, then hey, have at it. Go right ahead. But I have very high expectations for the Dolphins offense. And I know they haven't looked good all year. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of why the last 4 weeks haven't looked good and whether it's the quarterbacks and whether it's the play calling or whether it's the scheme and design. Like, we did that show earlier this week. We did it on Tuesday. But from the game and a half that you saw against with Tua at the offensive helm, this group gives you the most favorable matchups of any team that you've played thus far this season. You apply that, you read between the lines on what that's supposed to look like. And that's where I'm at. And I expect it, regardless of how in sync or on time the passing offense, it's going to be better than what it's been. Because there will be guys that are open that are at least going to get targets and have the ball thrown to them. The guy who's running the offense is at least the guy who sees the field the same way the play caller does. And we haven't had that definitively since week 2. And you can get into what they spent the offseason working on and trying to put it in and whether it was good or not. And I don't think a lot of what they worked on was particularly good. I don't think it's a coincidence that they came out of the bye week and they canned that escort swing route with two eligibles to run a flat route. I think I saw it twice. And one of them was on like a screen type of concept against Colts. So I have high expectations for the offense this week. That doesn't mean I have high expectations for the season, but I do have high expectations for the offense this week. Defensively, Beacham's starting right tackle. So if you're on Charlie Heck or Christian Jones, who's also on the injury report, and you got Evan Brown in there at guard with Tristan Colon, and you're missing Will Hernandez and you're missing Jonah Williams. This defensive, I'm expecting big things from Zach and Calais on the inside. That's one area that they've been getting a lot. The challenge that you have is containing Kyler Murray and what he can bring from an extended play perspective. I think bringing more DBs. I said this on WQAM this morning with Joe Rose, like just the guys off the edge to rush the passer. I'm not overly enthusiastic about it. So where that gets dangerous is in a game like this with a quarterback that if he has extra time and can run and scramble and then either run with his legs or force coverage to break down because he has more time to throw the ball. Like, I think in your passing situations, you should look to pressure Kyler with DBs. And that's not to say that you'll get him down with DBs, but I think having more athletic guys to try to flash and react to him on the space in space would probably be a good plan to do some of the things that you did against Anthony Richardson with Jalen Ramsey as a pressure player and Kader Coe as a pressure player. They just got caught against it down the stretch, and the DBs need to be more physical on the edge if they're going to come through a blitz and then they're going to run outside into the blitz. You can't get caught the way that you got caught against the Colts because there were a couple outside runs where your defensive end is crashing down because he's opening up the gap for the DB to come off the tackle, and then a skill player steps down and seals him, and the DB gets pinned underneath, and then you get outside of it, and you can't do that with Kyler Murray, or you get James Conner out on the edge, and that could be trouble for trying to tackle him out in space. So that's the big matchup element for me when the Cardinals have the ball offensively that I'm looking for. As far as game prediction, score prediction, final predictions from a production standpoint, that's coming your way next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is also the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts. So go to download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instant when you play your first $5 lineup. Download PrizePicks today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Pre-alcohol probiotic by ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. If you're going to the game, you're going to the Rock on Sunday, make sure your first drink is a pre-alcohol by ZBiotics. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break that byproduct down. Remember to take ZBiotics as your first drink of the night or the tailgate. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOn and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Now, my confidence in this football team is still pretty shaken. I expect Dolphins big on Sunday. And it's not just because I'm going to the game and I'm hoping to manifest it, although that doesn't hurt. But I do expect Miami and their offense, their running game, the infusion into the passing game with functional play, even if it's not precision play, functional play. I expect Miami to be able to dictate terms on the line of scrimmage. And I frankly expect them to be able to do it on both sides of the ball. Now, if Arizona can get into a game script where they get on top of you early, and there's been a lot of those game scripts this season, and they can lean on you, that's where Paris Johnson, Evan Brown, Kelvin Beachum, if he plays, Tristan Colon, that's where those guys are at their best. So you do just need to be mindful of, hey, please don't spot this team. Please don't spot this team 10 points and have to try to climb out of a hole. Not that you wouldn't feel like you'd have the explosive ability to do it because you're going to have a functional passing game, but I expect Miami to get yards in bunches. I expect the energy to be super high. You were kind of hopeful or speculated whether the energy would be high against the Colts coming out of the bye with the expectation that Tua was on the doorstep of coming back. And I thought you got that in the first half. And then obviously the game kind of melted away because you have to play a certain style of football to win a game like that. And it doesn't involve going into the red zone and calling a fullback dive with wide zone tracks with the offensive line and fumbling the ball in a tie ball game. It doesn't involve, you getting up 10-0 before the half and letting the defense or letting the opposing offense get into scoring territory in 22 seconds and giving up deep completions in favor of shallow completions and keeping everything in front of you. It doesn't involve fumbling on the first snap in your own territory after you forced a punt with a lead. That's not the recipe for winning close to the vest football game. And I think that's a very legitimate concern about this football team long term is the script in which you win. And there was some good with that against Jacksonville. There was some good with that against New England. There was some bad with that against the Colts. And the Buffalo elements is just the Buffalo elements as a team that's totally in your head. And the other two games were just you were non-functional on offense. So you got a little bit of good, you got a little bit of bad, you got a little bit of ugly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you've experienced it all from a game script perspective where the Dolphins haven't really been able to take it to anybody this season thus far. This kind of feels like a spot. This feels like a spot. I expect them to have that energy. I expect them to not have to play an error-free game script, and that's where their explosiveness does kind of put them back on the map. So you could put me down for Dolphins 27, which would be 7 more points than they've scored in a game this season, which would be to the great dismiss of Craig Carton from Fox, who thinks they're going to score 12 points this weekend. Dolphins 27, Cardinals 16. Put me down as the final score prediction, where I think being at home, Tua's return, the energy that comes from that, having a passing offense with explosive playmakers that can help cover even if you make the same kinds of mistakes that you've been making thus far throughout the season. The defense has been playing strong in just about every game that you've played. There's a lot of favorable matchups. There's not a lot of different ways that Arizona can hit you other than Kyler Murray putting on his cape and going Superman on you. Ramsey, if you want to play matchups, can play Harrison Jr. I like your matchups, whether Cater Kohu plays or not, with Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch and Zay Jones and Zach Pascal. And I think your safeties, if we get Javon Holland back, you get full strength in the safety room to try to contain a good tight end in Trey McBride, who's probably going to get some volume over the middle of the field, and he's going to get his catches, and you need to be prepared to live with that. Do you get Emmanuel Ogbah back? If that's the case, I feel better about you setting the edge and turning stuff back out so that James Conner doesn't get out on the edge on you and put your DBs in bad spaces. There's just a lot of good matchups in this game for Miami. And I know they haven't taken advantage of a lot of good matchups this season, but the script in which they've been charged with playing is one that they have not won with. And that's a whole other can of worms to get into. And regardless of where your tone is at with the team, I get why, but that doesn't change the dynamics that are in play this week for this football game, which is the only game that we have to worry about right now. Now, I've heard a lot from the fans this week, a lot of unhappy fans in a lot of different ways. And I want to be abundantly clear. You have every right to feel the emotions that you feel pertaining to this football team. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of anger. And I feel those things too. As somebody who was really invested in the direction of the team, I generally believed in the overall direction of the team. And this season there's games left to play. Do I expect them to finish the season in a manner in which we forget about it all at the end? No, I particularly don't right now. And I'm ready to ask some hard questions and look at everything under the microscope. And that's why we're evaluating this team on a week-by-week basis. But that's why I think it is important that you do set expectations on a week-by-week basis for the game that's going to be played, which is why fans ask me, what's the point beyond the fact that this is my job and I do it for a living? The point is, if you don't set an expectation on a week-by-week basis, how do you know what is continuing to go right or go wrong as you evaluate the state of affairs of the team and what needs to change and what doesn't need to change? Because I don't think take a blowtorch to the whole roster, wipe the whole thing down, tear it down to the studs, build it. Like, I don't think anybody wants to do that again. I don't think anybody wants to trade away good players that are young players, get rid of kind of the foundational pieces. I still think, even if you get to a point where you have to reset at the beginning of next season, things go nuclearly bad. The build that you just went through, even if it peaked too early or you had too much that was misaligned in the prime window of that build with changing coaching staffs and then injuries in 2022 and then injuries at the end of 2023, regardless, and that's not making excuses for why the breakthrough didn't happen. If the breakthrough doesn't happen, and then you have to make the change, then objectively you can look at it and say, yeah, this didn't achieve what it was supposed to achieve. But even if you get to that point at the end of the season, this roster is still in a much healthier place than it was in 2018 when you made the decision to start the build in the process. And I don't want to undo that to try to expand the team from what its current form is, if that is ultimately the path that we go down at the end of the season. I want to talk a little bit more about fan pulse, the things that you're feeling, why you're feeling them, how to feel them. That's next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. NFL fans, you can start the weekend with a big return over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet over on FanDuel at FanDuel.com. Interestingly enough, this spread is going up. This spread started at Dolphins -3, and it was off the board all week last week. And it comes on the board, Dolphins -3, and that came after it was announced that Tua Tagovailoa was going to practice this week. It's up to 4.5. You have a 1.5 line movement, so there's a lot of money that is coming in on the Dolphins. I would still be on it -4.5. I hope you got it locked in at -3. But very interesting that Miami at home, as a team that has had their fair share of struggles this season, is overwhelmingly perceived by the books to take care of business. And I think that falls in line with some of our game predictions. But you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So as we said, a lot of fans feel a lot of frustration. I am frustrated. A lot of fans feel angry with the state of the team. I am angry with the state of the team. As I say at the beginning of every show, I'm an analyst of this team. I cover this team. I try my best to be objective when covering this team, but I am a lifelong fan of this football team. And I want the same thing that you do, which is I want the Dolphins to win as many games as possible, and I want the Dolphins to win a championship. Let that sink in. And it shouldn't be a surprise as a lifelong fan of the team. And it's healthy for things that you care about and things that you are invested in that aren't giving back to you in the way that you want them to feel emotions about it and process all that. And you have the right to feel all the things that you feel. All I'm asking is that you're angry at the right things, or you try to direct your anger. Like being angry at everything, that feels super overwhelming to me. And that's what I feel from a lot of Dolphins fans is, oh, you're talking about the Dolphins? I'm angry with everything about the Dolphins. This whole Julian Hill tiff that I've been on in the comments of these shows this week about Julian Hill's the most penalized player on the team. And I've had some healthy conversations with some people through that. But then I have other people asking me, what are you, Julian Hill's family member? No, I'm not Julian Hill's family member. But my eyeballs work, and I watch all 11 players on every play for the season. So I know what Julian Hill is doing on a play-by-play, snap-by-snap basis. And the things that he's doing when he's not getting his name called still do provide value for this football team. Never mind the fact that of the 8 penalties, one of them, the one that this week that for some reason has him being the point of discussion that everybody's talking about, wasn't even him. And then you have the guy that some want to play instead of Julian Hill is the guy who had the holding penalty on the 30-yard run that took you out of scoring territory. And that's the same guy that dropped the touchdown pass that was right in his breadbasket against Seattle. Easy catch. Much easier than the one that people want to blame Julian Hill for not catching on a not good throw from Tua in week 2 against the Bills on the drive in which Tua got hurt. And that's what makes me wonder, is that what it's about? We're angry Tua's hurt, and Julian Hill became the scapegoat on the drive because he didn't catch a ball that wasn't particularly well placed for a guy has no receiving chops at the NFL level whatsoever because he played at Campbell and was predominantly a blocking tight end. So if I told you to be angry about what happened against the Colts, you're angry at the guy who's giving you good inline blocking skills, but got called for a penalty on the punt team that wasn't him, and not mad at the tight end that did get called for a holding penalty and took 30-yard run off the board for a loss of 40 yards on the play. Or you're not mad at the fullback who fumbled the ball in the red zone to cost you points directly, and you're not mad at the running back who fumbled the ball to give the Colts a possession in plus territory for the 3rd straight touchdown that the Dolphins defense has conceded this season on a drive that started in their own territory. You're not nobody's talking about any of those things. We're talking about Julian Hill. Why? He was a perfectly fine contributor to the cause of how the Dolphins were trying to play against the Colts. But he got called for a false start on the punt team? And objectively, I mean, he had 3 penalties against Seattle in week 3. Yeah, it's a young player who's trying to do too much because it's his first start of his career without a starting quarterback in the lineup. Doesn't excuse the penalties. They're also not back-breaking mistakes. 2 out of the 3 holding penalties Julian Hill's been called for this season, the Dolphins went on to get points and got fresh set of downs after the penalty. Again, it doesn't excuse the sloppiness, but the sloppiness, how about get mad at Danny Crossman, who I've been asking for accountability for effectively all season since week 2. Get mad that Julian Hill didn't catch a ball. Why is Jonnu Smith not running that route? Get mad at the implementation. Ask the players to do the right things. It's been one of the critiques that I've had for many instances, including when you're running perimeter screens and you got Braxton Berrios trying to set the point block against a linebacker. And Jonnu Smith's on the other side of the field blocking nobody. So feel the feelings that you feel. I hope the time that we spend together on this show gives you the right perspective of where you should feel it towards, instead of just feeling it towards everything. Especially, players who didn't commit penalties and didn't give negative plays that contributed to the loss. But that gets into the big picture issues that are at hand, the continuing theme of restricting elements of the football team in year 3 of the same regime, that if you're not getting better at, then it extends beyond just a player issue. I mean, there's some fundamental core things that need to be looked at and need to be addressed and need to be fixed. And you're running out of time to do it, especially for this season. And that's what I hope I can offer you some of, as you individually, each one of you processes those emotions. Cause I deal with them too. And I got to sit here and I got to watch all the game tape and grade all the players, and the day after the game, and you're sour about the game. And it's not fun, but I'm glad I do it when it's done. So I know where you should and shouldn't feel those emotions and who you should and shouldn't feel them to. And I hope you can take that into your weekend. And we can go from there, and we can see what happens at Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday against the Cardinals. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day, and go Fins.